Nick Viall slammed by RHOCOG Vicki Gunvalson post-podcast. Nick Viall got quite the shock when he had RHOCOG Vicki Gunvalson on the Viall files. He was then slammed by the OG of the OC post-podcast when she forgot to hang up her phone as she had called in. So, what did Vicki have to say, and more so, what was the Bachelor alum's reaction? Keep reading for further details. Nick Viall slammed by RHOCOG Vicki Gunvalson. Vicki Gunvalson and Nick Viall should get along very well given that they are quite opinionated. He never holds back his feelings about reality television, hot topics, and even his guests. Yet, things took an unexpected turn when the OG of the OC phoned in on the latest episode of the Viall Files. She was vacationing at her home in Mexico, so she did the interview from there. Of course, it was a thrill to have her on, but not so much when she ended the call. Or, so she thought she ended the call. According to Us Weekly, Vicki thought that she had hung up, as did Nick and his co-hosts. However, she was quickly heard still on the line, unaware of what was going on. Vicki then proceeded to talk poorly about Nick, claiming she had never heard of him and just did the interview as a favor. More so, Vicki stated that it was a favor to someone's dad, but that person remains a mystery. Vicki's hot mic moment started like this. Nick Viall and his crew stopped, their jaws on the floor as they realized Vicki Gunvalson had no idea she was still on the phone. She then went on to point out how she did not know Nick's name and had never heard of him. Are fans shocked this happened? After hearing what Vicki Gunvalson had to say after her interview with Nick Viall, were fans all that shocked at what she said? Furthermore, did they think it was all that bad or just typical Vicki behavior? She is so chaotic, this is hysterical. This was so chaotic. Giving Ramona for sure. We're happy you're here. Good. Family van energy face with tears of joy. Why is this the only way you could get me to listen to Nick Viall? I just listened to this and heard the hot mic at the end and I'm screaming. Someone pointed this out which could pull everything together. I think she meant Herd at Entertainment, that's the company who produces her podcast, I believe. So, if that is the case, it does not justify her not researching Nick before going on his podcast, but it clears up the dad situation. The podcast episode had barely gone live before social media erupted in a flurry of GIFs, memes, and hot takes. Nick Viall, former Bachelor star turned podcast host, had invited Real Housewives of Orange County OG Vicki Gunvalson to his show, The Viall Files, in what was meant to be a lighthearted conversation about reality TV, love, and drama. Instead, it quickly spiraled into one of the most talked about moments in crossover reality television history. Vicki, never one to mince words, had walked into the studio with her signature confidence. Clad in a tailored blazer and sky-high heels, she had prepared herself for a chat that would, in her mind, cement her legacy as the ultimate Bravo icon. Nick, known for his probing questions and occasional sharp jabs, was ready to dig into her past, present, and future. What neither of them anticipated was how their conversation would ignite a firestorm. The podcast sparks tension. As the podcast began, Nick opened with pleasantries, praising Vicki for her trailblazing role on RHOC and her contributions to reality television. Vicki, sipping a non-alcoholic margarita, graciously accepted the compliments but quickly pivoted to her grievances with how the show had treated her in recent years. I built that show from the ground up, Vicki declared, her voice tinged with frustration. Without me, there would be no. And yet, they phased me out like I was yesterday's news. It's insulting. Nick leaned in, his eyebrows arching slightly. Do you think the newer cast members bring anything to the table? Or is it all downhill without you? Vicki's answer was swift and biting. They bring drama, sure. But where's the substance? Where's the realness? These girls today are all about Instagram likes and manufactured fights. Back in my day, we brought our actual lives to the table. And guess what? It was more compelling than any of this fake stuff. The tone of the conversation shifted when Nick pressed Vicki on her infamous whoop it up persona. Some people say you've leaned into a caricature of yourself, Nick said, his tone even but pointed. Do you ever feel like you've become more of a brand than a person? Vicki's eyes narrowed. I'm not a caricature, Nick. I'm authentic. What you see is what you get. And if people can't handle that, it's their problem, not mine. But the real fireworks came when Nick brought up Vicki's tumultuous relationships, particularly her controversial romance with Brooks Ayers. Do you feel like viewers have a hard time separating your real life from the choices you've made on the show? Nick asked, his question laced with curiosity and skepticism. Vicki bristled. People love to judge from the sidelines, don't they? Everyone thinks they're an expert on my life, but they don't know half of what I've been through. I made mistakes, sure, but who hasn't? At least I own up to them. The fallout. When the podcast dropped, fans were quick to dissect every word. Vicki's passionate defense of her legacy and her sharp criticisms of Bravo's direction made headlines. But it was Nick's closing remarks that truly set her off. I think Vicki represents an era of reality TV that's evolving, Nick said at the end of the episode. But evolution isn't a bad thing. Maybe the Housewives franchise is moving in a direction that leaves the Vickis of the world behind. The comment didn't sit well with Vicki, and she wasted no time responding. Taking to Instagram Live, Vicki addressed her fans and her critics with characteristic bluntness. Nick Viall doesn't know what he's talking about, she began, her voice steady but simmering with anger. Who is he to say I'm being left behind? Last I checked, I'm still here, still working, and still a household name. What has he done besides jump from one reality show to another and start a podcast? Please. Vicki's rant didn't stop there. She accused Nick of trying to diminish her contributions to reality TV and implied that his questions were designed to provoke rather than to understand. I went on his podcast to have a real conversation, she said. But instead, he tried to twist my words and make me look like some washed-up has-been. Well, let me tell you something, I'm Vicki Gunvalson. I'm the OG of the OC, and I'm not going anywhere. Fans take sides. As Vicki's Instagram Live went viral, fans took to Twitter, Reddit, and Bravo fan groups to voice their opinions. Some rallied behind Vicki, praising her for standing up for herself and calling out what they saw as Nick's condescending attitude. Vicki's right. She paved the way for every Housewives cast member out there. Show some respect, Nick, one fan tweeted. Others sided with Nick, arguing that his questions were fair and that Vicki's response was overly defensive. Nick didn't say anything wrong. If Vicki can't handle constructive criticism, maybe she's not as tough as she thinks, a Reddit user wrote. Bravo stars weigh in. It didn't take long for other Bravo stars to chime in.